Cameroonians of all walks of life at home and abroad in their majority disengage from tomorrow's protest march and opt for the promotion of peace, solidarity and unity in respect of state institutions. The submission of lists of candidates vying for seats in the December 6th regional election ends in less than 48 hours. Elections Cameroon burns the candlelight to ensure that political parties respect the law. The Board Chair, Director General and Deputy Director General of the National School of Local Administration in Boya are commissioned into office and tasked to quicken effective decentralization in Cameroon by Decentralization Minister Georges Elanga Obam. Good evening and thanks for joining us. Those were the headlines of the 7:30 News.
Each of us must comply with the measures that have been taken.
We begin our half-hour newscast with a caution given to all Cameroonians in relation to the protest announced by the national president of the Cameroon Renaissance Movement, Professor Maurice Kamto. The Minister of Communication, government spokesperson René Manuel Sadi, underscores that tomorrow's march is a call for revolt, which should not be heeded. This was at a press briefing this evening at the Ministry of Communication. Here's an excerpt of Minister René Manuel Sadi.
This is a crucial ballot in furthering the implementation of decentralization, which, as we all know, is and remains a constitutional requirement. Moreover, we are all aware that this is a landmark in the democratic progress of Cameroon, which is a response to a profound aspiration of the Cameroonian people, and which would finalize the establishment of the institutional apparatus of the nation. The government of the Republic once again appeals to the maturity, the sense of responsibility and civic-mindedness of the Cameroonian people who, for the vast majority, we must proudly say, have never allowed themselves to be misguided by unscrupulous politicians.
The calls for protest by some political parties have been described differently by many Cameroonians. They vary from insurrection to revolt, political immaturity, and attempts to intimidate the average Cameroonian. Tonight, our guest is editorialist and central director of radio, Dr. George Wane. Good evening.
Good evening, Esther.
Thanks for joining us on the 7:30 News.
It's a pleasure. Thank
How
you for
do you
having
view
me.
this call?
So I should say thank you once again. I can only be in agreement with a vast majority of Cameroonians who see in the call for insurrection by the leadership of the MRC as crazy, undemocratic, evil, and even egoistic. What I should add to this is that the MRC call for popular uprising to chase away the current leadership of Cameroon is, as you know, carefully planned, hashed even before the presidential elections of 2018. It is a plan that shows the emotional romance of the MRC with power, a near sentimental attachment to the dream of self-exaltation as President of the Republic. Maybe someday. It is narcissistic and, of course, insane. But the party cannot wait, so it seems. They are bent, Esther, on attaining power, even through bloodshed of innocent Cameroonian youths. Now, if you don't mind, let us rewind the tape to see some of the provocative actions of the MRC leadership. Now, Thursday, October 4, 2018, 3 days to the Sunday, October 7 presidential elections, the then campaign manager of the MRC candidate, now arch enemy of his friend of yesterday, declared that the MRC had already won the elections, and he asserted, as he did, that anything short of that was going to have post-elections consequences. Now, the following day, Friday, October 5, 2018, the Minister of Territorial Administration, Paul Atanganji, sent a stern warning to MRC, asking him to steer clear of every manipulative tendency. Now, the declarations of the MRC leadership were not only unlawful and anti-democratic, but also set the stage for the beginning of a long tragic comedy on Cameroon's political stage. Monday, October 8, 2020, barely one day after Sunday's vote, the same political party leadership in a press conference declares itself victorious in the previous day's elections and provocatively calls on the incumbent president to hand over power peacefully, asserting that the presidential family will be protected. That indeed was an affront against the Cameroonian people, against the president. The pretext was that the Cameroonian people had given him the mandate to kick a penalty, which in his own words is kicked and scored. Now, by that football analogy, Esther, the MRC leadership forgot that a football encounter was 90 minutes, sometimes 120, and with possible penalty kicks that could involve all 22 players if need be. Even at that, the referee and the match officials, must sanction the final score of any match. That was the beginning, of course, of a carefully planned political cacophony that was undemocratic by all ramifications. Now, a psychological analysis of the MRC party leadership reveals that they have an irreverent obsession to power and self-exaltation at the detriment, of course, of the Cameroonian people through whose blood they were ready to reach a today. Now, I take you back again to Tuesday, October 16, 2018. 18 petitions are deposited at the Constitutional Council by 5 petitioners, among them the MRC. Now, in a rare show of comic political harlequinade, the MRC based its arguments on tribalism, whipping up at such tribal sentiments in the country with over 250 ethnic groups. Now, Monday, October 22, 2018, the Constitutional Council proclaims results of the presidential elections with incumbent Paul Biya winning by an overwhelming majority, as you know, of 71% of the votes cast by the sovereign people of Cameroon. MRC leader in those elections has an enviable 14%, of course, and that was not bad for a political novice. But the inordinate quest for power will push this party to cry foul and organize nationwide protests to contest the results in what he called electoral hold-up. Now, the man arrogated himself the title of Président élu, that is, elected president. Now, although banned by the government, the leadership went on to put the lives of innocent Cameroonians at risk, while their own children are quickly rushed out of the country to a safe haven.
Yes, and now, then let's come now to 2020.
Yes, now March 2020, I'm fast-forwarding
yes,
the tape.
George.
The MRC tried, to discredit the government's management of the COVID-19 pandemic and created what they call Suivi Cameroon Survival Initiative, with funds that government said came from doubtful origins, which today are said to have been allegedly embezzled or unaccounted for by the management of the funds within the party. But that is not what's important. Today, the party is unable to laud the government for the masterly management and control of the pandemic, one of the best COVID-19 management experiences, we should say, in continental Africa. Now, to cut a long story short, Esther, the MRC, so to speak, has taken Cameroonians for granted. You realize that they flout every law and make declarations without the mandate of the Cameroonian people. Let me take you to the crisis in the Northwest and Southwest regions. Now, this cannot be used, of course, as a political tool of destabilization, not at a time when government has taken appropriate peace-building measures through the major national dialogue and spin-offs from it that today have brought the situation on the ground to, of course, near normalcy. Now, you also remember the December regional elections are part of the solution to the unrest in the 2 English-speaking regions. Now, anyone who pretends to love the people of these 2 regions, Esther, and who also wants peace in Cameroon should, on the contrary, encourage the holding of these elections. That will be a window of opportunities for Cameroonians at large. By the way, the people of the Northwest and Southwest regions, of course, have not mandated the MRC to speak on their behalf. How many supporters does the MRC have in these 2 regions? If you count up to 10, then you can tell me. And so we should be able to say that the Southwest and the Northwest have a leadership, which is natural. The MRC seems to be noticing just now, Esther, that there are problems in the English-speaking regions of Cameroon. Now, they didn't see these problems in 2018 when they went in for the presidential elections in the heat, of course, of the crisis. This is what I call political provocation. And this is not a meal that Cameroonians cherish because political narcissism is, of course, as you know, a one-man show.
The march is billed for tomorrow, so according to your reading, what happens?
Tomorrow, what happens? Nothing is going to happen, of course, or very little is going to happen. Cameroonians will go about their activities normally. Markets will be open, stores will be open, candidates for the regional elections, those latecomers, will continue to deposit their files at the LECAM until midnight. Taxis will ply the streets, workers will be in their offices, and you name the rest. Now, in the end, it will be a storm, of course, in a teacup, because the few people who might come out will be highly, if not grossly, unrepresentative of the sovereign people of Cameroon, who democratically and, of course, overwhelmingly chose the elected President Paul Biya for another 7-year mandate. Now, the country's institution, Esther, are functioning at full gear in spite of the challenges. The President of the Republic still has 5 more years. He's experienced, focused, and, of course, as you know, an astute statesman whose sole business today is to see a prosperous and democratic Cameroon. Cameroonians are not fools, you know, and cannot be fooled again by someone who doesn't care about them and whose lame ambition is to become president by all means possible. Remember, Esther, that insurrection in the street is cowardice, and insurrection in the ballot booth is another option.
Thanks very much, George Wane, for being our guest on the 7:30 News. Opinion leaders also continue to criticize the protest march program by some political leaders tomorrow, saying Cameroon's peace should not be traded for anything else. They distance themselves from such an agenda which in no way advance development initiatives in the country. As we hear in this report by Beatrice Law-Samba.
Pressure mounts for the population to stay clear of planned riots as the hours die down to September 22.
Any person who loves Cameroon will not want to call anybody to go out to the streets. Cameroon needs peace now more than any other political upheavals.
Similar call was made by teachers and the lawyers, and the population came out. We did tell them that you can start a war, but you don't know when it's going to end, and that's what is happening. We have suffered enough, and we are still suffering, and we cannot accept that we start the suffering all over again.
Political leaders, on one hand, say an uprising in very turbulent times is a no, no, no. They are not ready to dance along.
We are not for it because no uprising, popular uprising, or call it insurrection, that has sent a head of state packing has ever installed democracy.
Workers, on the other hand, state they are craving for a stable country to build their enterprises, limping now due to the health crisis.
What is going on now is not our fight. Workers are fighting every day to keep alive, to take care for their families. One day, someone walks up and says, you have to march. To march for what?
The warnings about the destruction and insurrection would cause rain down as political leaders, civil society actors say their hunch tells them it wouldn't be a wise decision at all to step out for protest.
In the West region, the population commits itself to peace and solidarity for a prosperous Cameroon. At a meeting in Baham, the senior divisional officer Yampenu Masmu was joined by elected representatives like the Deputy Speaker, Honorable Theodore Dato, to say that there will be no demonstrations in the Upper Plateau. Chair Tembok has the details.
Leaders of some women association in Bahama Upper Plateau Division are thanking the democratically elected president of the country, Paul Biya, for strides to promote peace and development in the country. They say they and their children will not be manipulated by a native of the area. CRM National President.
We say no to the capital shame and yes to legality, no to insurrection, and yes to peace. That call for insurrection is a cowardly and irresponsible act.
The women have promised to remain vigilant and sensitize the population on the need to promote peace and unity.
And that definitely was just another meeting in Baham to say no to tomorrow's protests. Cameroon's diaspora has equally expressed its not adherence to the announced demonstrations that will threaten the peace and stability of the country. Many have opted to join the patriotic gatherings organized by Cameroon's embassies overseas, which focus on promoting unity. Beatrice Law-Samba reports on their love for fatherland.
Not party to cause for insurrection, Cameroonians in the diaspora have rather turned out for patriotic meetings organized by the country's overseas diplomatic missions. In France, this come together organized by the Cameroonian ambassador to that country, Andre Manus Ekumu, has drawn members of cultural associations in the country. Their biggest worries, promoting cultural values, staying true to the nation. Cameroonians in France put country interests first, he says. In Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, Cameroonians have been busy with giving their new ambassador, Ewumbe Churchwill Monono, a hearty welcome. Heading to cause for insurrection has not crossed minds, they say. Those of Casablanca, Morocco, have written in white and black their disagreement with any move that promotes division. They say they rather buy the idea of nation building and stand for development efforts. Diaspora associations have, rather than stayed silent, openly stated their disagreement with calls for an uprising.
Cameroonians undoubtedly have the right to hold public demonstrations, but this must be authorized by the competent authorities and must not be to the detriment of the sovereignty of the states. In the case where the plan clearly spells out the disruption of an electoral process, the perpetrators are liable to prosecution, as we hear in this report by Ebenezer Akanga.
The call for insurrection by the national president of the Cameroon Renaissance Movement, Professor Maurice Kamto, has met the type of response it deserves from Cameroonians. From the north to the south, east to west, Cameroonians have castigated what is clearly an attempt to destabilize republican institutions and plunge the country into disorder. The political class, academia, civil society, traditional and religious leaders, youth and women's associations, trade unionists, commercial motorbike riders and hawkers have voiced strong condemnation of the call. Appeals have been made from all the four corners of the country for Cameroonians not to heed to the call for insurrection and for citizens in all the regions to go about their activities normally this Tuesday, 22nd of September 2020. Cameroon is facing a lot of challenges, notably Boko Haram terrorism in the far north region, COVID-19, and the socio-political crisis in the northwest and southwest regions. This is therefore not the time to create more problems in a country which our citizens want to live in peace. In any case, Cameroonians should learn from the crisis in the northwest and southwest regions that it is easy to start chaos, but very difficult to stop it.
And now on to one of our top stories. Political parties across the nation are finalizing and depositing the list of candidates who will be running for the regional election billed for December 6 in all divisional headquarters. The submission of files at Elections Cameroon is due to end at midnight on Tuesday, September 22. On the eve of the deadline, Kilian Dandifon was in some political party headquarters to get the polls of readiness. Here's his report.
Less than 24 hours to the deadline for submission of files for regional elections, CPNR is still working on its list of candidates, but party officials say they are ready.
We are trying to be ready at the deadline. We will run in about 8 or 9 divisions in 4 regions.
At the NUDP headquarters, party members are dotting the I's and crossing the last T's.
We are ready. The work was done at the grassroots before the final investiture by the National Commission. We shall submit our list within Tuesday's deadline.
CDU party leaders are not waiting for the last minute to submit their list of candidates.
One of our lists is in the hand of Elekam, and I am traveling to Bafoussam to finalize the second list.
CPDM has worked from base to top with committees and lawyers to preempt any errors.
The CPDM will submit its list invested by the national president on time Tuesday at the Elekam divisional branches. Saturday and Sunday, the National Committee work on the Regional Control Commission that scrutinized the list from the basic organs.
Contestants have until midnight Tuesday to submit their list to Elekam.
20 traditional rulers from each region will be voted as regional councillors during the upcoming polls. The Electoral Code stipulates that representatives of traditional rulers will be elected by an electoral college composed of first, second and third class chiefs whose designations are approved by the law. But who is eligible and can the candidates be listed differently? Constantine Baum probes into the complexities of the candidatures.
The deadline for submission of lists for the upcoming regional election is tomorrow, Tuesday, 22nd, midnight, and it is the first of its kind in the institutional history of Cameroon. The Electoral College has its own peculiarity.
Representative of traditional rulers, whose list should be headed by a traditional chief who is supposed to be first class and second class chief native.
The one big question is whether it is possible to have one name on two lists from the same area.
According to the provisions of Section 256 of the Electoral Code, no person may stand for election on more than one list or be member of more than one regional council.
The list of candidates representing traditional rulers as per the law must have the capacity of a first-class or second-class traditional ruler.
Section 247 of the Electoral Code, the third degree can be invested as candidate.
The decision to accept or reject a candidature or list of candidates may be challenged by any candidate, representative of a list, or any member of an electoral college.
Now on to echoes of some of the recommendations taken during the major national dialogue, which is the effective implementation of bilingualism in public institutions. In conformity with the 1996 Constitution, where English and French have equal status and value, there has been an impressive attempt to have all official correspondences in both languages. Clarissa Reitaka reports that an example is at the Presidency of the Republic.
From official documents to social media outings for various reasons. Either way, the English and French languages are both present to inform the public. Preaching by the bilingualism example is the Presidency of the Republic, from where correspondence on appointments, ratification of accords, or the holding of other major events in the country are conveyed in the two official languages. It was one of the recommendations for the major national dialogue. The use of English and French should be systematic in public service institutions, written as well as spoken.
We have noticed great progress, and I think that everybody now is willing to be bilingual in order to permit everybody to be aware of what is going on. It's better to have the two versions of every decree.
The major national dialogue is a year old. Opinions hold that efforts made to give the event its raison d'être must be upheld. One of them is the effective practice of bilingualism.
Today to commemorate the International Day of Peace on the theme Shaping Peace Together. In the Northwest region, where there are still some pockets of separatists who are menace to peace, the clergy have raised their voices in prayer for the return to normalcy. Kilo Valerie Insala reports that supplications were made against violence, destruction and gruesome killings.
Various religious bodies on repeated occasions have been rallying the faithful behind the peaceful values of historic religious figures in a move to restore normalcy.
The First World War ended because Our Lady came to Fatima to tell the children to pray the rosary, and peace came back. So if we pray the rosary and invoke Mary under the title of Queen of Peace, peace will come back to our region, peace will come back to our country.
On media platforms, preachers have also been driving home the messages of peace and reconciliation.
If we were created to be the most intelligent creation of God, we should be more reasonable. Our weapons should not be for killing one another. We have to avoid it.
The various religious bodies which have been victims of the unrest, with some of their Christians tortured by the ugly happenings, are keen on ensuring that they should be part of the solution-providing chain.
The wearing of face masks in public places will be mandatory until further notice.
In health, over 20,000 persons have so far been infected with the coronavirus in Cameroon. Public health experts are now working on how to reduce the number of COVID-19 positive cases through what they term breaking the transmission chain. What does it entail and how can the population survive, especially when they've been easing on barrier measures? Baldwin Summer and his guest at the Public Health Emergency Operations Center tells us more. Hello, Baldwin.
Good evening to you, Esther Kima, and welcome. The fear of the unknown is a priority of most public health experts nowadays, given that they are working on a possibility to prevent any second wave of the spread of COVID-19 in the country through what is being referred to as breaking the transmission chain of the coronavirus in the country. That's what we shall be discussing with our guests tonight. Kurt Kingsley, who works in the contact tracing unit here at the Public Health Emergency Operations Center. Good evening to you, Kingsley.
Good evening.
When we talk about breaking the transmission chain of COVID-19, what does it mean?
We talk about breaking the transmission chain of COVID-19. It means stopping the propagation of the virus among the population. That is from ill persons to persons who are not ill. We stop the transmission.
And given the present context where the government can contain the spread of this virus, is it possible to break this transmission chain, or is it that we are so uncertain about tomorrow?
Talking about breaking the transmission chain in the near future look pretentious because it depends on the number of factors and parameters. One is the development of the immunity among the population, and two, the respect of all the barrier measures, and three, the participation in all the activities that get toward fighting the virus. And therefore, the most important one is the testing of the population, mass testing, to select those who are ill and even those who are asymptomatic to follow up their contact. And there is a set of population that are asymptomatic, and that's the one that the population that has the most important problem. If you can select all of them out, we'll be able to master the transmission chain and break it tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Kurt Kingsley. You work here in the contract tracing unit of this Emergency Operations Center, and Cameroonians are reminded that they must continue respecting all these barrier measures to limit the spread of this virus if we have to successfully break the transmission chain of the coronavirus in Cameroon. Back to you, Esther Kima.
Thanks very much, Baldwin Summer. Now we know how we can break the transmission chain. It is by respecting the barrier measures. On to our countdown to the start of the 2020-2021 school year, we settle on how petty traders in the nation's capital, Yaoundé, are getting set. The majority of them, with limited purchasing power, have over the months been engaged in saving schemes that would today enable them get the necessary school items for their offspring. Cynthia Saptala went to some markets to seek the opinion of some vendors. This is what she found out.
It does take an additional effort to save at least 500 francs each day. That is what many roadside vendors and hawkers at the Fundi market in Yaoundé say they do to prepare for back to school.
When I say I make sure that one day I must save the 2,000 to pay.
For this petty trader, for example, economizing the day's profits from the sales of crayfish makes it easier to avoid being overwhelmed by the expenses for her 7 kids.
When I take one burger jacket for 4,000, sometimes I sell like 5,000, sometimes 5,500, sometimes 6,000. So I make sure every day I feel save my 2,000. 7 picking them. I buy my thing small. So we're going to pick the over need another only school fees.
Coupled with these daily sacrifices, others rely on local saving schemes to provide the necessary school items.
I belong to an association, or Jangi. I sell vegetables each day, and I have been buying the necessary items like books and pens. Shopping for school is never enough.
But not all succeed. For some like Alima, saving is a major difficulty despite his 2 jobs as truck pusher and part-time waiter. According to him, it may take a while before he joins in the back-to-school preparations.
The Cameroon Radio Television is also on the back-to-school frenzy with the launch of a 3-week radio program titled Back to School. It is an initiative which encourages parents and the education community to effectively prepare for the school year in the face of the global health pandemic. Yvonne Ako reports.
The program has contents from all 10 regions of the country and surpasses the COVID-19 pandemic. Priority is also given to those in the crisis-hit Northwest, Southwest, and Far North regions.
We will be treating things like 6 months break or 7 months break. Have Cameroonian teachers been trying to upgrade with the e-teaching and e-learning? We will also have programs like choosing a discipline. What is the role of parents and the guardian counselors? We will have content programs in view of eating in school.
The Back to School campaign on the national station of the CRTV is on air weekdays from 9 a.m.
We're sorry for bridging that report. Now on to diplomacy and cooperation. The Pioneer Resident High Commissioner of India to Cameroon, Sri Rakesh Maluta, has pledged to work in collaboration with the Cameroon Radio Television, CRTV. During an audience with the Director General, Charles Ndongo, both officials talked about the Hindu audiovisual content and trainings. The High Commissioner's visit comes a month to the 150th anniversary of India's anti-colonial nationalist, Mahatma Gandhi. Here's an excerpt of the
it is obvious, CRTV is the national broadcast, and I thought to come and see the Director General here because I would like some cooperation between the High Commission and the CRTV to see how best we can collaborate. And while between CRTV and High Commission, there could be some areas in which we can collaborate. One area could be training of the people working in CRTV, and there could be promotion of, exchange of documentaries and films. Bollywood is very popular in India, and not only in India but in Cameroon also. So we can certainly, collaborate by showing some of the documentaries and films in CRTV.
Take this reading of a press release from the Ministry of Communication. The Minister of Communication hereby informs the general public that the 9th edition of the Fair on Government Action, dubbed SAGO 2020, will take place from the 22nd to the 25th of September 2020 at the Yaoundé Multipurpose Sports Complex. The said event, whose objective is to positively showcase the work of the government among public opinion, is placed under the distinguished patronage of His Excellency the Prime Minister, Head of Government. The public and all the institutional stakeholders are cordially invited to be part of the event. It is signed by the Minister of Communication, Rene Emmanuel Sadi. And that'll be all for the 7:30 news tonight. I'll be back tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. But meantime, in under 30 minutes, you'll be in the company of Romeo Chuse. Stay tuned to our programs on the CRTV. Thanks for watching. Good night.
In this connection, we should avoid stigmatizing.
CRTV News, ici, toute l'info.